When I say industrial revolution, what do you think? Yeah, there's always keywords that seem to get tossed around when you talk about industrialization. One is factories, okay? Machine sometimes is one of the first ones that you guys get thrown out or that throws out, gets brought up, okay? But then there's the market revolution, and it is more of an integrating thing, okay? It's actually kind of taking what happened in the Industrial Revolution and integrating it into American markets and watching the changes that take place. One of our goals today, okay, is not just to, we're going to talk about some of the industrialization stuff, and some of it we've already kind of talked about as we've gone along. So some of this is going to be really familiar to you. But one of the things that we want to do is to start linking it further, okay? And talk about why this is such a big deal and why it's going to transform America from, let's face it, in the beginning we were a pretty rural and sort of agricultural area to eventually becoming a major industrial power, right? That's why we call it a revolution. That's why it is a big change, usually over a short period of time. So keep that in mind, okay? What were the results of this early 19th century industrialization in America? In other words, it's not just what it is, but what did it change? What are we looking for? What things are changing, how things are changing, where things are going, okay, and how it transforms America. So keep that in mind. We're not just looking for facts and machines and workers and owners and stuff like that. We're looking to see how this is changing America. We'll start with the transportation revolution, okay? And some of this is pretty familiar to you, okay? One of the first things we talked about with the transportation revolution is the building of the national road. This goes back to Henry Clay's American system. And I told you that what Clay wanted the nation to do was to build a road that linked states together using federal money. Remember that the whole purpose was to do what? To use federal money, okay, because this is a project that links together states, okay, and build a road that would make it easier to transport goods across the interior. You got to remember, there's a mountain chain right up through here, okay? So you want an easier way to transport goods throughout the interior. And if the national road would have been completed, essentially what you're talking about here is linking together places, okay? And eventually what you have here is you have the ability to move a good from St. Louis all the way to Baltimore via road, okay? Told my class yesterday, the Romans were great at building roads, okay? The ancient Romans built roads, they built them for military purposes, okay? But what kind of the side effect was that trade flourished as a result, because people could move goods into the city, out of the city, across Rome, across Italy, right, and even into other parts of Europe, because the Romans built such good roads. By the way, the Romans only built straight roads. Did you know that? No Roman road has any curve in it. So what happens if they ran into an obstacle? They did what all Romans do. They just bulldozed it out of the way. Okay? The Romans built straight roads, period. Okay? And they blasted away at anything that got in their way. No curves. Look carefully here. Look at Lancaster. Okay, everybody see Lancaster, Pennsylvania up there? That's the Lancaster Turnpike. What's it doing? It's kind of an off section of this, right? What's it doing? It links the Susquehanna River to what? The Delaware River. So you could move a good all the way to Baltimore, then go into the Chesapeake, up the Susquehanna, catch the Lancaster Turnpike, and take it directly to Philadelphia. See that? What's the biggest city in America at the end of the Revolution and really in the early 1800s? It's the biggest city in America. Philadelphia. Okay? Everybody see where we're going with this? Okay? Roads are limited, right? Why are they limited? Well, they are expensive, but what else? You can only carry what a wagon and a horse can really carry, right? So there are limits to the amount of goods that you can move by road, okay? There is a physical limitation, okay? So, and it's a biological restriction, okay? There's only so much a horse can carry, or a horse can pull, or an ox can pull, or whatever, okay? So there's nothing mechanical yet about the Cumberland Road. You don't get on it with your car and drive. That's not what it's designed for, okay? It's designed for things like, oh, there's the Lancaster Turnpike, by the way, okay? By 1832, we've got about 2,400 miles of road connecting most major cities. But this road is not for cars, it's for what? It's for goods, okay? It's for moving goods back and forth across the interior. Usually by wagon, okay? Conestoga wagon is one of the most famous, okay? Durable, heavy, could carry a heavy load, okay? It was covered, so you kept your goods dry. You could take shelter in it, okay? I mean, this is, you can't watch you really can't watch a Western movie without seeing a Conestoga wagon, right? I mean, they are ubiquitous. They're everywhere in the 1800s, okay? If you are moving anything over long distances, the Conestoga wagon is sort of the way you want it to go, okay? And they will continue to be used throughout this period. But eventually, technology starts to creep in, okay? And some of the effects of the Industrial Revolution start to show up. For example, by 1807, now notice, that's before really the National Road really was getting going. Robert Fulton had developed and built a successful steamboat. Now, obviously, from the name of it, a steamboat is a boat propelled by a steam engine, right? What's the advantage of having a boat propelled by an engine rather than by the wind? Well, an engine is constant, right? The wind, not so much. All right? So tell me about the other problem. If you're moving goods from place to place, all right, current is a big deal, okay? Go sometimes when you get bored one day, go to Vicksburg and go to the Welcome Center at Vicksburg right by the river bridge. Any of you ever been there before? Okay. And just sit out there for a couple of minutes and watch the barges go by and watch what the current does to them. Okay? Current's a big deal. Okay? Going down a river, no problem. Okay? Current's always going to take you, right? So if you hop on the Mississippi, where the Ohio and the Mississippi come together, all right, St. Louis somewhere, and you want to go to New Orleans, no big deal, because the river will get you there. Okay? What if you want to go to New Orleans to St. Louis? you got to go up the river, right? So you have to rely on some sort of power, whether it be human power or sail power, or by the time we get to Fulton Steamboat, okay, steam power. With more power comes the ability to move more goods and to move them both directions. And that's a big change. The steam engine is by far one of the most important inventions of the Industrial Revolution. The Industrial Revolution, you guys know, I hope you know, began in England in the late 1700s or so, by the 1780s or so. James Watt will be one of the pioneers of creating the steam engine. The steam engine is, the idea of a steam engine has been around forever. It's been around since the Greeks, okay? The problem was efficiency. How do you make an efficient steam engine? Okay, we measure every really thing today by efficiency. Okay, your car is measured by efficiency. Okay, what measurement do you look at when you go and look at cars or shop for cars that talks about efficiency? Yeah, miles per gallon. Okay, so if I put 1 gallon of gas into my car, how far can I go? Okay, and that's a consideration. Okay, and that tells you how efficient your car is. The more miles you go, the more efficient it is. The Greeks never could really get an efficient steam engine. But by the time you get to the late 1700s, early 1800s, a lot of these guys have access to more technology, and steam engines become more and more efficient, which means that they can propel steamboats, they can propel locomotives, they can drive machines in factories. And it is the power revolution, the steam revolution, the power revolution, that drives the early industrial revolution. Today, we kind of look down on steam power, okay? Don't. Steam power is still used today, okay, in very ultra-modern ways. When we look at, for example, you look at today's most technologically advanced warships, whether it be the aircraft carrier or the submarine. What powers those? Wow, you guys are not up to on your military technology. They're nuclear, okay? They are propelled, or they are powered by a nuclear reactor. What does that nuclear reactor do? It turns water into steam. And it is propelled under very high pressure into what? A turbine. And that turbine does what? Creates electricity. Okay? So, we haven't come that far. We've just modernized. Okay? And by the way, steam, that steam in aircraft carriers, for example, is what launches planes off the deck. It's what propels that ship through the ocean. Same is true for the submarine. We've just made it more efficient. Now, this has a huge benefit on waterborne travel in America. You heard me talk about the Erie Canal. There's the Erie Canal system, which allowed you to move goods via water from Buffalo and Lake Erie all the way to the Hudson River, and of course down to New York City along the Hudson River. So essentially, you could move a good across Lake Erie into Buffalo, and then all the way across New York to get to the Hudson River, then down the Hudson River and out at New York City. Never touching land. Okay? This has a huge benefit to New York. Allow them to move goods efficiently via water using the river systems and using the Erie Canal system to stimulate trade and to move goods across the state. Okay, and remember, New York's a pretty big state. Okay, so geographically, this is a big deal. It helps them link together the Great Lakes, and it helps them link together the Hudson River with the Great Lakes. And today, of course, we still move massive amounts of goods along the Great Lakes. Okay, still do. So there's an early view of the Erie Canal. Okay. All right. By 1840, we have canals that link together these areas. Now, of course, what I really wish is that some ingenious person would have helped me out here and would have drawn this on there. So I'm going to see how terrible my artistic skills are. But here's Baltimore, right? So what runs through there? The road. And you can kind of see that just from the way the canals are, right? How it fits together. You overlay that road with the canal system, and you can start to see this massive transportation system that's been built by the 1840s. All of this, though, is pretty soon going to be supplemented by another form of transportation and another part of the transportation revolution. What is it? What is that? Yes, the railroad. Okay. Railroads get started in America. The idea, when you take the second part of this class, or if you take the second part of this class, one of the first things you talk about is, when we really get into that class, is the rise of big business. The railroad is America's first truly big business, okay? And it's a big business first because of space, okay? It's spatial big business because you're moving goods over long distances. That's what railroads do and do efficiently. But you need an engine and you need the ability to move goods over long distances, up and down grades, okay? Because remember, the earth is not flat, okay? So you're going to have to climb hills, you're going to have to go down hills, okay? And you got to be able to tow enough weight, all right? So you're going to need a steam engine that can accomplish that. And by 1830 or so, you're starting to see locomotives become able to do that. And so what you're going to see eventually is a rapid investment in American railroads. In 1830, we had a whopping 13 miles of track that had been built by the Baltimore and Ohio Railroad Company. Okay. By 20 years later, we have 9,000 miles of railroad track that have been built. And by the eve of the Civil War, that is over tripled. In the 10-year period between 1850 and 1860, we're up to 31,000 miles of railroads. Railroads are a snowball industrial revolution company, okay? I call them that because it's like the snowball rolling down the hill. You all have seen that in cartoons and everything. And once it gets going, right, one, it's almost unstoppable. And two, it sucks up everything along the way, right? When the railroads start to build more and more track, they tend to suck up more and more of the Industrial Revolution and actually force other parts of the Industrial Revolution to pick up the pace. Give me an example. What are railroads going to eat? What do they need? Coal to fuel the locomotives, okay? And what else? Come on, knuckleheads. What do they ride on? What do you see up there? Train track is made out of what? Iron, okay? Steel now, but iron then, okay? So you've got to have iron producers, coal producers, producing enough so that you can consume those things that are necessary, which forces iron furnaces and coal mines to become better, to work harder, because there's a demand for those products. Does that make sense? How do you fire iron ore and turn it into iron? What do you have to do? You have to heat it to very high temperatures. So what do iron production facilities need? Coal. So now you got a huge demand for coal, okay? How are you going to move coal from coal producing areas to where you need it? You're going to have to use transportation, right? Steamboats, other things. Well, guess what? What do they need? Duh. See what I mean? It snowballs on you, okay? And they start to suck up resources. And of course, one of the goals is, in any business, is to have high demand. People wanting your stuff, which means you can make profits. And so you got to get better. You got to supply that demand. And that's what happens, okay? I love maps because sometimes maps really tell you a lot of stuff without having to tell you a whole lot of stuff, okay? Take a look at this map. And you guys tell me, okay? All those black lines that you see up there are railroads that have been built by 1850. Okay? Railroads that have been built before 1850. All the red lines are railroads that have been built between 1850 and 1860. Where is 75, 80% of all the railroad track located? In the north, right? Why? Is it because the northerners liked railroads more than the southerners? No. Why? That's right. Where is all of the industrial action taking place? In the manufacturing centers in the north. Okay? Where's sort of the boundary? Okay? What was that? The road. Okay? And so, where is most of the nation's rail production? It's linking together those transportation systems, those manufacturing areas that were already present in the north. If I asked you right now to tell me one of the major advantages that the northern states will have when the Civil War breaks out, what are you going to tell me? They have more railroads. What else? They have more technology. What else? They're more industrialized. Where are most of the guns built in America? In the North. Who has a better way of moving, a more efficient way of moving troops, material, food, weapons, whatever? The North. Who's going to win the war? Why? I mean, you can look at this map and get a pretty good indication of why. But if you guys notice, there are some railroads that have fingered their way down into the South, especially from 1850 to 1860. Why? What has the South become a leading producer of? Cotton. And so we need ways to link the South to cotton textile producing areas. So you've got to be able to move Southern cotton along the railroads out into these port facilities. And notice what they link together. Places like Nashville and Memphis to New Orleans, or places like Nashville to Charleston and Savannah. Okay? Or the railroad that runs down the spine of Mississippi that takes stuff from northeastern Mississippi, from Memphis and that area down to Mobile. Okay? Or down through Jackson and down to New Orleans. Okay? Because you're moving cotton out to the ports where it can then be sent abroad to England especially, which has become a huge consumer of raw cotton, or to textile facilities in the north, which you can move easier on water sometimes anyway. Why? I hammered you guys when we first started this class about how you couldn't talk about Southern agriculture and equate it to cotton all the time, okay? Remember me, I just blasted you guys, okay? Don't tell me on the exam that Virginia was producing cotton. Remember that? Virginia was growing what? Tobacco. What was North Carolina growing? Tobacco. What was South Carolina growing? Rice and indigo, right? What are they all growing now? Cotton. Why? Why? It is. It's supply and demand. Exactly. What they have, what's going on in Europe and eventually here, is that cotton is going to be able to produce or going to be able to provide a high demand for textiles. Now, cotton wasn't always the best form of this, okay? I'm going to come back to this in a minute, okay? Cotton wasn't always the easiest thing to deal with, okay? And we talked a little bit about this already, okay? Inside of a bowl of cotton, you have the cotton fiber, which is the white that you can see from the side of the road sometimes, right? But hidden in those fibers are seeds, okay? And they are very difficult to extract. Now, you can't run textiles with seeds in it, okay? It will make a very poor quality textile, okay? It will foul up the works. It's just not going to work. So the seeds had to be removed. Well, prior to 1791, how were the seeds removed? By hand, okay? You working all day. If I sat you down and taught you how to do this, okay? In 10 hours of work, you could extract the seeds from how much cotton, you think? How much could one slave do? How much cotton could they clean in a 10-hour day? Anybody know? About a pound, okay? which, by the way, is a lot of cotton, okay? Because cotton is a fiber. It doesn't weigh all that much, so you got to kind of think, that's a pound of cotton is a pretty good bit, okay? But that takes you 10 hours. In 1791, Eli Whitney invented what is known as the cotton gin. All right, what's the gin part? You might know. It's short for what? E. There you go. Cotton engine, okay? Or he just shortened it to the gin. All right. This model that you see right here is kind of the hand cranked variety, okay, which would take a couple of people to man. Okay, you'd have to have somebody to kind of feed the cotton in, somebody to turn the crank, and then somebody to remove the clean fibers. Okay. You gave them the raw material and the cotton gin. They could clean about 50 pounds of cotton in a day. Okay. Takes 3 of them to run it, so you divide 50 by 3, and what do you get? A little over 15, right? So they are 15 times more efficient with the cotton gin than they were by themselves, right? Because if you sit all 3 of those guys down and you give them, they're going to produce about 3 pounds of cotton. With a machine, they're going to produce 50 pounds of cotton. Now, and of course, what you realize is that entrepreneurs will get better and better at this. They will take Whitney's cotton gin, scale it up to where, and then power it with steam engines, and you're going to get an even bigger yield, right? But this is kind of it's not a new idea, okay? People in India had developed a system of combs that would do the same thing. It's just not quite as fast. Now, Whitney patents the cotton gin in 1791. Does he make any money off of it? Well, you'd think, yeah, right? Wrong, okay? Other people copy it. He can't really go out and sue all those people for violating his patent. So it takes him years to try to get the patent approved, and then to get the patent office to agree that he was the first to do this. And once he gets that done, then there's about a year left on his patent. So he makes very little money from the cotton gin. Probably made more money off of this idea of making interchangeable parts for rifles. Okay, modernizing weapon technology, standardizing weapon technology. Before, rifles were all hand-built. They were all custom-made. But let's face it, a rifle is just a tool, right? So you take it apart, you standardize everything about it, okay? You start making those parts to the same dimensions, okay? Then you take all of those parts together, and you should, if they're all identical, what should you be able to do? Pick at random parts, put it together, and have what? Functioning weapon. And that's what revolutionizes really the idea of functional weapons. Remington Arms will be pioneers in this. Okay, and today, of course, the most visible weapon probably in the world is the AK-47, the Kalashnikov. Okay, Kalashnikovs are great weapons because they're all made out of cheap stamped steel. They're all standardized. And so if you have a malfunction or you have a problem, you can tear that apart, replace it with parts from some other weapon, and it will work just fine. Okay? Changes the way we think about how to make weapons. Whitney's cotton gin, though, has some long-term consequences. Long-term consequences. There are a lot of historians, again, that find something to point to as perhaps one of the causes of the Civil War, and a lot of people will point to this. Whitney's cotton gin makes cotton production in the South profitable. Coupled with slave labor, it means that the South can devote itself to an economy centered around cotton production. In the lecture for the next time, you'll hear me talk about King Cotton. It's the cotton gin that allows Southern agriculture to crown cotton the king. They can be very profitable by mass producing cotton, selling it abroad or selling it to industrial centers. And they can make hefty profits at first, because there's a high demand for cotton. But as the South produces more and more cotton, and as technology gets better and better so that the South can produce more cotton, prices will go down. That's supply and demand, right? More supply equals lower price, right? But you can still be profitable in the South because you have cut your labor costs down to the bone because you're using what? Slave labor, okay? Which still allows them to be profitable. Look, I told you before, and you will hear me say this again, so you might as well just get used to it, that there is no historian worth his salt that is not going to tell you that slavery was the cause of the Civil War. Okay? It just is. But there's always subtext to that. Okay? And here's a good example. Because the South, when the Civil War and when the Civil War seems to be imminent and slavery seems to be under attack, okay, the South sees this as an attack on what? Their way of life, right? And their economy. They see this as an attack on their ability to sustain themselves, their economy, okay? And so that is how you'll see them justify this, okay? That this is our economy, you're attacking our economy. When you attack slavery, you're attacking our ability to sustain ourselves. And of course, they're not going to let that slide. So the cotton gin, true, is a great invention. It revolutionizes textile production, but it does come at a cost for us here in the South. All right, textiles become a major part of European manufacturing and American manufacturing. So as more and more cotton is produced, it is more and more is turned into textiles, and then more and more is sent and turned out. Well, you got to be able to take those textiles and manufacture them into something wearable. And so you have, by the 1840s, look at it. Look what it's called, by the way. The what? The sewing machine. All right? So flip it on its head. It is a machine that does what? It sews. Okay? How did you have to sew garments together prior to this? By hand. Okay? And now, what do you have? The ability to use a machine to do the sewing for you. Makes it more efficient. And, of course, makes it, when you have a large amount of textiles being produced, this is what's going to allow you to turn those textiles into finished goods. And of course, you all, I hope, have heard of the Singer Sewing Machine Company, okay? Elias Howe also invented one, but Singer is probably the most famous. Farming even plays a role in this, okay? John Deere will have patented a steel plow by 1837, which is not only going to help agriculture in already established parts of America, but eventually, of course, is going to help those farmers that are going to move west too and begin to farm out west. So you have farmers that are patenting various machines to help farmers be more efficient. This happened in Europe. This happened in England. Okay. And it's going to happen here in America too. The farmers become more efficient. They can plant more. They can harvest more. That's Cyrus McCormick's mechanical reaper. And it allowed you to harvest grain much faster than with a hand-tooled scythe or something like that. Okay, the mechanical reaper was much, much, much more efficient. Today, here in the South, what do we call these? What do you see? When you have something that cuts down the grain, strips the grain, and then spits out the waste, what do we call them? Combines, right? So this is the modern combine, really the front part of it, which cuts down the crop and then begins the process, is essentially the beginnings of the McCormick reaper. One of the things that we're going to kind of finish up with is that the court and American government has become a little bit more friendly to business, okay? For example, okay, Gibbons versus Ogden right here tore down some of the barriers that states had erected trying to tax or interfere with trade between the states. Now, the Constitution pretty much makes it very clear that only the federal government can regulate trade between the states. And Gibbons versus Ogden not only tore down those barriers, but also reinforced that idea that trade between the states is a federal jurisdiction, is a national government jurisdiction. It will not be infringed upon by the states, okay? As part of the Enlightenment, as part of the later Industrial Revolution, you had a lot of economic thinkers like Adam Smith that talked about laissez-faire. In French, laissez-faire is it's really like an idiomatic expression almost. It kind of means let them do or allow them to do. But essentially what laissez-faire economics is that the government stays out of the economic side. It allows the people that are working, trading, to regulate themselves. So laissez-faire capitalism by the 1830s or so is on the rise. What that means, okay, capitalism is something that you all should be familiar with. But capitalism is pretty simple, okay, when you really kind of boil it all down. Capitalism is nothing more than a group of investors pooling their money together to create something, whether it be a whatchamadoogle, whether it be a phone or whatever. You want raw materials coming in, you want a finished good coming out. And you invest in this idea, you buy the necessary machinery, you hire the necessary people, And of course, what you want is them to transform your raw materials into that finished good, and then that finished good to go on the market and make a profit for you, okay? Sales of your, whatever your good is, okay, funnel money back into the company. Some of that is spent to keep the company going. Whatever's left over, though, is profit. And the investors that took the risk should be rewarded with a share of the profits. And so capitalism really is going to be fueled by some of these Supreme Court decisions, and also by the company or by the nation wanting to become more industrialized. In the early 1800s, we recruited, stole, borrowed all sorts of ideas, okay, to start the manufacturing process here. Okay, we were borrowing anything we could get our hands on. But eventually, we are going to start to make stuff on our own, okay? And when that happens and capitalism takes over, you're going to see the distribution of wealth change a little bit, okay? All right, during the American Revolution, 45% of all the wealth in the country was in the top 10% of the population. So you take all the American population, you cut off the top 10%, okay? 45% of the nation's wealth was in that top 10%. Richest man probably right after the American Revolution was maybe George Washington, okay? Tons of land, okay? So he would have been in the top 10% of the population. And people like him had about 45% of all the wealth in the nation. In Boston in 1845, look at how it changes. The top 4% of Boston residents own 65% of the wealth in Boston. So you've gone from 10% controlling 45% of the wealth to, in Boston by the 1845, the top 4% owning 65% of the wealth. It's worse in Philadelphia. The top 1% of Philadelphians owned 50% of Philadelphia's wealth. What this means is, that means when you think about it, let's look at Philadelphia for a second, okay? The top 1% own 50% of the wealth. That means the other 50% is scattered out among what? The other 99% of the population. Okay? So if there's 100 of us, okay, and I cook all of us a steak, one steak, okay, you get the lucky number, so you get half of the steak, and the other 99 of us are left to carve up what's left. We're going to have little bitty pieces, right? That's the problem. You have a widening in the gap between the rich and poor. This happens in every capitalistic country. It happens in every industrial country. Okay? It's part of capitalism, and it's part of the development of industry. The problem is that eventually those people on the bottom are not going to be happy about their situation. Okay? And they are eventually going to want to get a bigger piece of the pie. But the factory system is one of the things that contributes to this, okay? Those people at the bottom, okay, many of them are factory workers, okay, and many of them are going to be, at the bottom of this situation. They're going to really work very hard for very low pay, low wages. Because if you mechanize everything, then you're easily replaceable. You don't have any skills. And so you're going to work for low wages all the time. So the factory system, as we know it, is one of those contributing things, okay? By the early 1800s, you see this in a lot of places, okay, like the Lowell system, or sometimes it's called the Waltham system, okay? And you see it a lot in textiles, okay? And this is Francis Cabot Lowell's town in 1814, okay? It's in Massachusetts, okay? And it really is an industrial town. It is a mill town, okay? It is designed to turn raw material into a finished good, okay? Now, I want to show you this little blurb here, okay? So I'm going to get out of this for a second, okay, and see if I can find my little blurb here.
In time, it will blow the nation apart. For the South, cotton is a gold mine. Now the North wants a piece of the action. It's a partnership that makes everyone rich. Based on a new machine, the power loom. Raw cotton comes in, finished cloth goes out, all under one roof. The modern factory is born. Lowell, Massachusetts is called the city of spindles, a textile boom town. Population explodes from 200 in 1820 to nearly 20,000 in just 15 years. More than a third of the town works in the mills. 85% are single women between 15 and 25. Harriet Robinson is 10. When her father dies, she goes to work at the mill.
I can see myself now, racing down the alley, between the spinning frames, and carrying in front of me a bobbin box, bigger than I was.
Women earn money for the first time. Harriet's wages help support her family. Industrialization is changing everyone's lives.
Oh, the mill girls make good use of their money. The mortgage is lifted from the homestead, the farmhouse is painted, mill girls help maintain widowed mothers and drunken or invalid fathers. We were paid $2 a week. Oh, how proud I was when it came to my turn to stand upon the bobbin box.
When women really joined the workforce in the cotton mills and the thread factories, I think it gave women an opportunity to get out, be serious about being breadwinners, and it changed the whole fabric of America.
The mills also revolutionized how Americans dressed. Mass production of cheap cotton fabrics spawns America's clothing industry. Previously, most families made their own clothes. Now people buy ready to wear. Eastern fashions replaced buckskin. By 1850, men's clothing is the largest manufacturing industry in New York City.
For me, what makes me proudest to be an American is that American spirit of productivity, optimism, this idea that the world doesn't have to be doom and gloom, that we can use technology to make our lives better.
Fashion isn't the only innovation to come out of the mills. Technology developed here will lead straight to Silicon Valley. Looms pioneered punch cards to produce patterned fabric. Each hole in the card tells the loom to use a different colored thread. A yes-no decision. It's binary code, the basis of all modern computers. The birth of the computer and internet began in cotton mills with these looms.
You know, in every major development, I think, in the history of America, technology has been at the center of it.
Despite 12-hour shifts, the factories offer a new world of opportunity for women. They're reading more, talking more, educating themselves.
We enough, reading books on factory tool was against the rules. But we hid books in apron pockets and waste baskets. Sometimes we painted poems on our looms to memorize.
And for the first time in America, their voices are heard. October 1836. Women from the Lowell mills gather after work and organize. Their protest against wage cuts is one of the first strikes in U.S. history. And they will win. The mill bosses back down. A generation of young women go on to become teachers, writers, and even college graduates. Harriet Robinson will become a leading suffragette and testify before Congress. They're the first wave in a movement that results in women getting the vote. Their secret meetings at night are only possible with the light from lamps powered by an extraordinary creature.
All right. So the interesting thing about the Lowell system, and if you kind of watched that, you probably saw it, is that they intentionally recruited young girls, 15 to 25. Okay. Why? They had to be unmarried, they had to be single, they had to be 15 to 25. Why? Yeah, they didn't pay them, they didn't have to pay them as much. Okay? So yes, it was a great idea. All right, because many of these young girls and young women would be willing to work, okay, because they needed to help their families or whatever, okay? But because of who they were, you didn't have to pay them as much as you did a man, okay? And so it benefited the company because it held down wages, okay? And therefore, you were still making your product, because remember, all the skill is technically in the machines, right? So you're still making your product, but you're having to pay less to do it. And you can see why New England became a major textile center, okay? And so the Lowell girls went to work, and they kind of moved up, and as they got older, they took jobs with more responsibility, okay? They lived in the town, okay? They lived in housing, and of course, some of that was taken out of their pay, okay? But of course, it gave them a chance it gave a whole lot of women a chance to meet other women. They had access to libraries. They had access to guest speakers. The Lowell system would bring in outside speakers, and I'm talking about big name speakers. Okay, John Quincy Adams came and spoke at a Lowell factory one time. Okay, so former president of the United States. Okay, so they had access to books. They had access to tutors. Okay, and some of them went on to become very well educated, mainly because of life in the Lowell town. Okay, but don't for a minute think that they had an easy time. Okay, they did not. They worked as hard, maybe even harder than any industrial worker anywhere. Okay, and so you can look at the time there, and you can see that they're going to go to work at 4 or 5 in the morning, and they're going to work until 6 o'clock at night. Okay. So it is, and they're going to work hard. And what they say, they're going to get how much a week? $2 a week. Okay. they are one of the first groups to eventually try to, calling them a union is tough because unions don't technically sort of exist in America at that time, but they would organize, okay, and would eventually try to get the girls a little bit more of a say. But the Lowell system is going to fall victim to, and even some of the Lowell girls are going to fall victim to another thing that kind of throws a wrench into this, okay, and it's immigration. People from outside of the United States will start to come into the United States seeking a better place to live, freedom, economic opportunity, land, whatever. And so some of these people are going to begin to make their way into America. And when they do, when these immigrants from other parts of the world start to make their way into America, there is a common thing that seems to happen to all of them. Okay, they are discriminated against. They are not well liked. We tend to act very poorly towards immigrants at this time, especially. Now, we'll talk about a couple of different areas, but Irish immigrants coming into the big cities is one big sore point. And eventually, many of the workers at Lowell factories and other places will be replaced by young Irish women who were willing to work for even less than what the Lowell girls were working for in the beginning, which of course made them very a target for a lot of anger and frustration. Irish immigrants will also arrive around about the time where we start to build railroads. And Irish immigrants will, in the East at least, be responsible for building many of the railroads, okay? And so they, as you can tell from this, are not very well liked by many Americans, okay? They are they're discriminated against. They are oftentimes not well liked. And as one of kind of as you start to move, you talk about American population in 1860. Okay, a lot of these very intensely populated areas out here have a significant amount of immigrants. Okay. Politically, that will eventually lead to problems, okay? So we'll kind of see. Where do they come from? Okay, a big percentage of immigrants came here from Ireland. Okay, almost 39% came from Ireland. About 30% came from Germany. About 15% came from Great Britain. Okay. So the biggest portion of immigrants coming here to America prior to the Civil War came from Ireland and Great Britain. Okay, the other biggest was Germany. As a result, you will even see a third party emerge called the Know Nothing Party. Their nickname was the Know Nothing Party. Okay, but they were a very anti-immigrant party. We call them nativists. Okay, they were very anti-immigrant, very discriminatory. They favored using American labor and American products rather than those made by immigrants. Okay. And so we can even be very discriminatory during this period as well, especially towards immigrants. Okay. All right, we'll stop there, okay, and we'll kind of leave that be. But one of the things that I'm going to go back and talk about in our next sort of lecture about slavery is we're going to draw some more connections between the cotton gin and King Cotton in the South, and see how cotton begins to permeate, well, cotton and slavery began to permeate the really the soul of the South, and how cotton really drives the South towards this sort of one crop slash slavery centered economic system that we'll have to deal with all the way to the Civil War. All right, we'll see you guys next time. Okay, be looking